Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to episode 27 of the Not AFib podcast, powered by the Journal of Emergency Medical Services. My name is Mark Flaughter. In the fire service, clarity is paramount as it promotes safety. The primary mission is to protect lives and property. Clear expectations regarding safety protocols and procedures are the bedrock upon which this mission is built. Firefighters must know precisely what is expected of them when facing the chaos of an emergency. Unclear or ambiguous expectations can lead to confusion, errors, and dire consequences. When expectations are unclear, aggressive behavior diminishes and individuals default into mere fireground robots, which is profoundly worse. Alternatively, when setting expectations, clarity is vital regarding which ones apply to everyone and which are specific to a few individuals. The question must be asked, are they fair? And most importantly, are they enforceable? In the high-stakes world of the fire service, where lives and property hang in the balance, the significance of setting clear and concise expectations before holding someone accountable cannot be overstated. Determining which expectations are formal and informal can offer critical guidance to your crews. This guidance helps them manage their shifts, reduce stress, build confidence, and allows them the remaining bandwidth to provide creativity, problem-solving skills, and growth. Understand that firefighters desire to solve as many problems as possible, as quickly as possible. If the expectations of these individuals are not clear, then we've roadblocked their determination and succeeded in minimizing their impact. Firefighters are entrusted with the safety of their communities, and accountability is a cornerstone of their profession. Yet a disturbing trend has emerged in recent years: conflict avoidance. This modern dagger threatens the effectiveness and integrity of fire departments across the nation. In this article, we'll explore why setting expectations is crucial and how avoiding conflict can undermine the very essence of the fire service. Fire departments must establish a culture of accountability where expectations are clear and deviations are addressed promptly and constructively. This begins with leadership setting the tone for accountability at all levels. Firefighters and leaders need training and education on conflict resolution, communication, and constructive feedback. Understanding how to address issues effectively is essential to overcoming conflict avoidance. Leaders must strike a balance between maintaining a positive work environment and holding individuals accountable. Supportive leadership can provide feedback and correction without initially resorting to punitive measures. If your first reaction as a leader is going straight to discipline before you even seek clarity, your people already know this about you and will act accordingly. If you can remove the emotion behind error and speak to the issue, understand the thought process, and consider coaching first, you'll gain their respect and will then have made a cultural deposit into your organization. And those are excerpts from an article entitled Expectations and Accountability: Setting Expectations, Dealing with Conflict, and Practicing Accountability, from October 24 by Matt Aalto. Matt Aalto currently serves as a Battalion Chief Training Officer and Recruitment and Retention Coordinator for the Estacada, Oregon Fire District. Just prior, Matt served as the Captain and Training Officer, Recruitment and Retention Coordinator for the Gaston Fire District from 2016 to 2023. Matt was employed by the State and Fire District as a career firefighter EMT and oversaw the district's Recruitment and Retention Coordinator responsibilities from 2011 to 2016. Prior to that, Matt volunteered with the Cornelius Fire Department. In addition to being a line officer, Matt co-founded the Oregon Fire Recruitment Network, which has brought multiple fire agencies in Oregon together in a unified effort to recruit and retain firefighters across the state. The network went live in 2013 and since then has successfully recruited over 2,500 firefighters who have made it through an academy and are now serving the fire lines in Oregon. Matt is a subject matter expert for the International Association of Fire Chiefs and was an instructor for the Recruitment and Retention Certification course and the Building a Collaborative Team course. He has also helped create national recruitment courses and acts as a subject matter expert for the National Volunteer Fire Council. Matt holds a master's degree in public administration, a bachelor's degree in fire administration, and an associate's in fire science, and a certificate from Notre Dame University in leadership. Matt holds multiple Oregon NFPA DPSST fire certifications, including Fire Officer 4, PIO, Firefighter 2, Instructor 3, Live Fire Instructor in Charge, Engineering Boss, and more. Matt is also a graduate of the National Fire Academy Managing Fire Officer Program and is currently in the Executive Fire Officer Program. Matt has managed both SAFER and AFG grants in multiple capacities with the Estacada Fire District, Gaston Fire District, and the Staten Fire District. Additionally, Matt has been successful in grant writing and strategic planning for multiple fire departments across the state of Oregon and nationally, while specializing in recruitment and retention needs. Matt has become a well-known specialist in organizational leadership and conflict management. In 2024 and 2025, Matt delivered his class Expectations and Accountability at FDIC and is now delivering this class nationally. It is my pleasure to welcome my EFO classmate, Matt Aalto, to our podcast today. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me. I appreciate being here.
Well, you obviously are very well accomplished. So let's start kind of at the beginning. What got you into the fire service or fire EMS service?
Yeah, it started with a CERT team. Believe it or not, there was a CERT team that I thought I saw an advertisement for and I thought might be interesting. I joined up and I did their 24-hour class, enjoyed it, but they don't really do, a whole lot post that class. So I started doing volunteer work with the American Red Cross and disaster action training. And with my experience there, I loved it. And I was actually on a call responding with a Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. There was a cold fire and I went in to help support a burned out family. I had a conversation with one of the lieutenants who had said, have I thought about the fire service? And I thought, gosh, I'm probably too old for it, but no, I hadn't really thought much about it. And, but it stuck in my head. So I followed through and I decided it was something I wanted to give a shot. So I went back and did my research. I decided I'm going to go ahead and go back to school. So I did I went back to school, started an associate's program, Portland Community College, and started to volunteer with Cornelius Fire. Got the bug, as many of us do. And after a little bit of time and some applications, I was able to get picked up at Staten Fire, which is my first career job. And it went from there, Mark. It was really a buildup of passion, excitement, the thrill of doing what we get to do, but then also the sense of accomplishment. And being a small business owner and other things, it was a feeling that I had not had before. So that's what led me to the fire service from before I had anything to do with it.
Okay. And you've been at Estacada for how long?
Just about 2.5 years. So it'll be my 3 years in July.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about Estacada. What type of district is it? What type of area do you cover? What activities are you doing there at Estacada?
Yeah, so we are a combination department. We have A, B, and C shift with 3 career folks on it. We have a full staff of volunteers. We have 47 volunteers in our ranks. We're one of the very proud stations that can say we are full. All of our turnouts and all of our gears are filled out with our folks. Estacada runs a pretty high number of high acuity calls. During the summer times, we have very aggressive wildland fires, grass fires. This time of year, which is in the wintertime, we're dealing with your chimney fires and structure fires. And then naturally, we also have our EMS calls. We're a non-transporting agent, but we are ALS. And our call volume is just about 2,000 calls a year. And there's a tremendous amount of excitement around the organization. Right. Everyone has a little bit to brag about, about their department, but we have really focused so hard, Mark, on actively practicing retention. I like to say that we're a 95% retention department, and we do 5% recruitment only when we need to. Okay. And so in summary, that's just a kind of a snapshot of what Estacada is.
Yeah. So before we jump into, you talked about recruitment and retention, so we'll start there. But before we jump there, for those who are not familiar, where about in Oregon are you located? Obviously, Oregon's a pretty big state. So most people probably would like to know a little bit about where you're operating.
Yeah, so we are near Portland. We would be considered in the Portland metro. Okay. So for those that know the Portland area, we're on the west side, Upper West Side, and we would be just east of the Portland metropolitan area in Clackamas County.
Okay. Okay. You talked about recruitment and retention. We touch a lot on EMS here. You're in the fire service, but you run EMS, and so much of EMS is fire-based. So the ideas that we discuss here could probably be easily transferable to an EMS agency.
Yes.
Recruitment and retention is a problem in a lot of areas of the country. Specifically, as a recruitment and retention coordinator, what are some of the actions or what are some of the things that you're doing? You talked about your high levels of retention. So what's the key to the success out in Estacada?
The key really comes down to protecting the line. And then this is for EMS or fire. These are for all individuals. I define my job as a battalion chief to work for those individuals that I'm here for. My job is to create an environment for them to thrive, so
Hmm.
that when they go home, they can thrive as they define it in their homes and their lives. So when they come back to the station, they can come here and work really hard and know that they don't need to work in fear. They can work and have fun and do well. And that's again going to the expectations and accountability. But reverting to retention, retention is putting our line first. So one of the things that the number one thing I think we do really well here is we have a very good pulse on the opinions, the thoughts, and the beliefs of our line on our performance, so that we have a measurable result of, are we doing our job as administration? Are we fulfilling the promises? Are we doing the things we need to do? We measure this through a quarterly climate survey. Every quarter, we send out a 47 question survey, and it's anonymous. Our folks can reply to it, and they can leave comments, or they can just leave check boxes as far as their levels of satisfaction. And we look at this every single quarter. We share the results. We outline the places that we really need to work on. They see our trends. And then we also show them the exact efforts we're doing to work on these issues. And then we follow the trending on the climate survey from a couple of years.
Hmm.
This has really been a success because it shows that there is the ability to say, hey, things aren't great, or things could be better, or I want to contribute to make these things better. And that's where our retention comes from. It comes from that mindset. Mark, we just did a 5-year strategic plan. And one of the things we talked about the most on it is protect the culture, defend the culture of an organization. And our culture is retention first.
Hmm.
And so getting to summarization of your question, our focus and our efforts really come down to that feedback, being able to say, we want to make an environment that you can come in and expect has continuity, that has character consistency, that has some predictability, that, yep, you're going to run the calls you don't like. Yep, there's going to be the things about the job that aren't thrilling. However, we do support our members. They know that we support them. And that is our everyday goal. And I would say that is where we have found success.
A few months ago, I had Dr. Richard Janka from the 911 Training Institute on. We talked about culture and how leadership sets the culture. And obviously, your department is doing that. Can you give us an example? You talked about your climate survey. Can you give an example of maybe something that you or the leadership has seen on a client survey that has had an impact on your department that's either changed a policy or changed the way that leadership looks at things to make it a better place for your members?
Yeah, I can think of one on the top of my head. One of the concerns that came up was inconsistent communication. Right now in the workforce, Mark, we have 6 generations all in the workforce.
Mhm.
Now we only have 1%, in the silent, generation. We only have, kind of 1% in Gen Alpha, but we have so many different communication styles. And one of the things that we had found that we were missing on is we would send out department emails, and they would go to all the personal emails of everybody in the organization. And only our career staff at the time had department emails. And so what we had learned was our communication out, even though we had good intentions, it wasn't reaching everybody. And we realized that we had to make some changes in order to send official communication out in ways that people would understand it while still controlling what that message sounded like. So one of the climate survey feedbacks in the past was, I don't get emails on time. I don't get notified of events. I don't know how I can give feedback.
Mhm.
And once we got to the root of that and were able to create clear communication channels, that went away. Those problems went away. and also just briefly touching, I thought you said something interesting. Leadership sets the culture. In our organization, I would say it's different.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I would say that our firefighters, our line sets the culture, and our job is to support a healthy culture. And so, when people join a fire department, they don't go to administrative office and go, "What's your culture like?"
Right.
They go on the engines, they go on the ambulances, and they
Mhm.
want to see how those folks interact. And so, really, our folks are the ones that have set that culture, and we get to enjoy and be a part of it and help sustain it, for all the right reasons, right? The healthy parts of the culture. So,
Right.
um, but um, but anyways, going back to the examples, this is how we fix these problems: is that we follow the trends, we hear the issues, and then we work to solve the problems, and then we close that loop and go back to them and say, okay, here were the three things you brought up. Here were the three solutions we provided based on feedback and information. How was it going?
Right.
Did it improve? Did it get better?
Right.
And it's validated by the climate survey saying, yep, it got better. And then we can move on to other things.
Right. It obviously the Northwest, Pacific Northwest is a little bit different than other areas of the country. So for someone who may be listening, who heard you say, well, recruitment is not as big an issue for your department, but it's a huge issue for my department. What are some things that you can recommend, or some things that you may have seen in the past that somebody can adopt to enhance their recruitment?
Yes, and we are an exception, Mark. So everywhere in
Right.
the country, it's not just Pacific Northwest. Estacada is very much an exception among even our neighbors. But what I would say first is the best thing that a department can do is make sure their house is right before they start to recruit anybody else. If you have a toxic culture, if you have incomplete processes, if you don't have span of control, if you don't have room for lockers, if you don't have the ability to train properly, if you don't have all of those things in place to create an environment where somebody can thrive, create that environment first before you start recruiting. Bring people into an environment where they are going to have a chance. Bring people into an environment where they have the tools they need to succeed. So many times, the rinse, wash, and repeat of recruitment is we bring in as many people as we can, we hope a couple stick, and then we're right back to recruiting. And I was no different. I for many years was that way, until I created a very clear line as far as the type of values that matter to organization, the type of individuals that would create and add value, and making sure that when they join this department, we'll be able to deliver on the promises. And at the exact same time with that, a lot of people leave departments when they feel that they're being treated differently, or if they're treated as an exception, and that hits on the expectations and accountability. Our expectations are X amount of hours per month, so many drills, and so many calls. If an individual is unable to make those, we don't just get rid of them, but we have conversations, we have systems in place, we have plans in place. And then if they choose to not be able to make those times, then we move on from those individuals. And it happens in a lot of different ways. We rarely have a disagreeable separation. We go through everything we can to try to keep our folks active. But if they're unable to do that, then we look for an alternative for them. But we, as a department, must be able to prioritize our 911 responses, and we have to be able to have as many people on the rigs as possible. And because that's part of our retention values, we haven't had a lot of pushback from folks that we've had to part ways with.
Mhm.
Um, and it's never fun to part ways with somebody, but to the point is, if our house is in order, I can bring people onto it as long as I've got room.
Right.
If the house is out of order and you don't have those things set, please don't recruit somebody into it, because they're not going to have the tools or abilities to help fix your problems. They're going to become a part of that and not know the difference.
It's interesting that you say that last comment you just made. We have a member here who came to our department from another department in our county, and the department from which she came is pretty well known as what you might consider a destination department.
Yeah.
However, this particular member just mentioned some of the things that you talked about, that their house was definitely not in order. It was a divided membership. and this particular member with us just hated it there, which to some might seem as a surprise because they consider themselves one of the elite departments in the county. And like I mentioned, they are a destination department. But when you hear things like that, it leads directly into what you were just saying regarding culture and
Yeah,
bringing people into a house that is not in order.
yeah, and not everybody's has the same destination, right? The
Right,
destination apartments we have them too, and they're just not for everybody.
right.
And I, Oregon's got, just so many destination apartments that are just dream places.
Mhm.
And when I think of destination apartment, this is not a cut to Estacada, but it just doesn't pop in my head that, hey, this is one of these top 3 or 4 stations, in the entire state of Oregon. So when I think about bringing people into our organization and keeping them, right, I want them to stay. And if
Right.
they find another opportunity or their destination department is something different, they still have my support. I still advocate for them.
Mhm.
But while they're here, I want them to be as happy as they possibly can. I want them to enjoy it as much as they can. And I think that's where a lot of departments, when they're losing people and they say, yeah, I'm always losing people to this other department. Well, yeah, you can't always compete at every single level,
Sure.
but every department can compete in its own way.
Right.
And a lot of people will stay with an organization, even if the pay isn't perfect, or even if they don't run as many calls, or even if it's not perfect, they stay for different reasons.
Hmm.
And again, going back to the generations in our workforce now, they're motivated by a lot of different things. Some are motivated by money. There's no doubt about it, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But there are others that are motivated by working with their friends,
Hmm.
working with people they know, working with people they trust. They value their time more than they value more money. And understanding those differences is important to highlight your own organization, because every organization has their things that make it attractive. And if it's not a fit for somebody, hopefully they learn about that in the application process.
Right.
But we rarely have career firefighters leave our organization. We rarely have volunteers. But when they do, typically for our volunteers, they're getting hired on someplace, which is
Hmm.
wonderful. And for our career firefighters, we're still in close touch with them, because these are people that these are wonderful things. This is positive attrition.
Right.
It's not negative attrition. Positive attrition is people moving on for things that are better for their families, things that
Right.
make them happy. Negative attrition is, I don't know why they left, or I couldn't fulfill a promise.
Hmm.
And so we track both of those numbers really closely as well.
Yeah.
So it's a part of our process too.
Yeah. One of the things that we've seen here at our district is we've had a lot of new members come on in the last several years. For instance, we had earlier this month, we celebrated the retirement of 3 members. So we've had a pretty decent amount of new members
Yeah.
join the district, and giving them a voice, letting them participate. That kind of is one of those things that you just discussed. That's one of they want to contribute. They want to come in and they want to hit the ground running, so to speak. They just want to be able to participate. And I think that goes a long way towards what you just mentioned about making that connection and keeping those members at the department, because they're contributing, they're helping, they're instructing. We have members who have been on the department for maybe 5 to 7 years who are actively participating in instructing new members who are just joining the department.
Yeah.
So it's things like that that creates that environment that people want to stay.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. When I think about someone's been around 5 years, 6 years or longer, and they might be in the Generation X or millennials, and now they're able to teach the Homelanders generation, which is Gen Z, or they're able to teach Gen Alpha, and they're able to put this energy into it. They are creating institutional knowledge. They're creating that buy-in. And when you talk about the one synonymous thing that every single generation, Strauss Ho generational theory, they're the ones that came up with the generational theories. um, the one thing they all had in common is that they want to have a say in what's going on around them. That's the one thing they have in common. And they've been tracking generations they have 28 different generations tracked all the way to like 1433. And the two things they have in common is, one is they all want to have a say in what they're doing, and second is the generation after them is probably the worst generation. That it's the following generation, something's changed.
Right.
Um, but it's really important that we think about that when it's sometimes about buy-in, but it's always about listening and understanding, and what that looks like matters. It's also not to be confused with replacing logic with a committee. So many times we go, well, I want to hear everybody's opinion. I'm going to get a committee formed, and a camel is a horse designed by committee. Too many people, or sometimes the wrong people in committees, come out with terrible products. It's having the right people that are vested, have the right people that are the processing the information, that create these things that support the retention of your organizations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I certainly learned the hard way about the bad committee when I went through my first ambulance purchase back in about 2009. Yeah, definitely,
Yeah,
definitely a lesson learned.
yeah, that's a fire scar right there for sure.
Yep, absolutely. We talked in the opening about expectations and accountability. So I think this is a good now that we've discussed, culture, talking about what we want, what makes our members stay. Let's talk a little bit about some of the expectations from our members, both on the fire side, and for those of us that run EMS, it applies just as well.
Yeah, the way I've broken it down for a general understanding is we have our formal expectations, and then we have our informal expectations. And when you think of like formal expectations, it's typically, in making your runs, you're doing drill, you have app checks, your EMS training, your assignments, restocking equipment, reports. These are all your formal expectations. But you also have your informal expectations, and these you see in an EMS house, in a firehouse. And these are standby responsibilities. This is, when do we make coffee, changing out toilet paper, mopping and cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
It's all the other things, right?
Right.
And the expectations side of thing, it's one of the soft skills that I talk a lot about. A lot of the fights that we have, 90% of the fights that we fight in a firehouse are 90% of the fires we fight are in the firehouse. And they typically begin with a failure to set a proper expectation, or a failure to hold somebody accountable.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of think of them as like a bookends of leadership. And so in the class, we start to talk about which expectations do we hold our people to? Have we explained to them the expectations? I can remember when I had started at Cornelius Fire as a brand new volunteer, and I went into the station and I was told to go upstairs and wait. And so I went upstairs and I waited, and there was 5 of us, and we waited in chairs at the kitchen table. And when the firefighters came up, they said, "You haven't earned a spot at the kitchen table yet." And we're like, okay, what does that mean? We didn't know what that meant. There was an expectation. It was an informal expectation, but it was part of the firehouse culture. And that kind of, it dawned on me that, which expectations do we have? Are they realistic? Do they apply to everybody? Are they enforceable? Do they make sense? These are the things in this conversation of expectations and accountability that you might have a book full of SOPs. And I'm guessing in your own organization, Mark, you probably have, what, 100, maybe 150 SOPs, give or take, certain many?
I'd say probably that's a good number. Yeah.
Okay. And as a working professional, that these things matter and they're important. How many of them would you say that you have memorized?
0.
0. Yeah. You and I are the same number. And so it's very difficult. That would be maybe a fair statement to say it'd be very difficult to hold somebody accountable 100% to these SOPs, because there's so many of them. There's so many intricacies in them. And so when do we hold people accountable? How do we hold people accountable? And that's where the conversation starts to transition into, every generation looks for accountability a little bit different. And every generation wants expectations set a little different. Baby boomer generation was, you shall do it, and you don't necessarily ask why. I'm telling you, and so you do it.
Right.
That hasn't been the case anymore. And if an expectation is set, the why behind it is critical that we explain to it. And this is a generational difference, right? So however the expectations you have in your organization, informal or formal, it's important you have a system in place so that people understand what they are. And in addition to it, here's what happens if these expectations are not met. And this is where you can get into a slippery slope where you might come into work, Mark, and everyone goes, Mark's so solid on his job, he does great. Yep, he made one mistake, but he's doing fine. Somebody else comes in and they're new, they make the same mistake, same accountability, but no actions taken. Well, I'm sorry, same expectation, but no accountability is taken.
Hmm.
Well, that can cause some frustration or confusion, especially if it's on a localized contract for thou shall or thou shall not.
Right.
The point I'm trying to make is that setting these expectations that they're clear, they're understandable, and they're written down supports how our firehouses and our EMS houses function. Informal ones are also important so people understand what an informal expectation is and what that looks like. We're really, really good at holding people accountable to the informal expectations. We don't do such a good job on the formal ones. So now on the accountability piece, it's what does accountability look like and how do we do it? And this is where a lot of folks struggle with the soft skills. This is where conflict is such a difficult thing in our fire stations because people have mastered anti-conflict. They've mastered avoidance, and either they can fire off a quick memo and think I just did it, but that human interaction, the conversation, the understanding piece is missing. Expectations and accountability, at least this course and the conversation, it provides skills and answers and some language that can help responders work with each other.
Hmm.
And I'm happy to provide some examples, but it really does come down to are you creating a culture of accountability? If you've created a culture of accountability, then you have done your members, your staff, your administration a tremendous service. Because it doesn't mean you have a culture of accountability isn't everyone going around yelling at each other or pointing the finger or you
Hmm.
know what it is. It's supporting people that make a mistake. Ownership is there, additional coaching is there, and you move on. Um, it's when that turns into the accountability of I'm going to point fingers and blame, and now I'm scared for my job or I'm scared to get written up. Then you don't have a culture of accountability. You have a culture of fear.
Right.
And when you get into that, it's already the slippery slope has already been lubed. It only gets worse from there.
Right. When you talked about the culture of fear versus the culture of accountability. What when you have someone, a member, who has consistently demonstrated what may be considered unprofessional behavior, rudeness on calls, rudeness towards residents, um, and they've continually been counseled, they've received discipline, write-ups, but yet this behavior continues. At what point is the accountability such that it's time to separate from this particular individual?
It's I wouldn't be able to put a rubber stamp and say this is what I would do in every time because
Sure.
I definitely view every individual in the long game.
Right.
It's so saying that let's say that we are in the long game with an individual, and there's the difference between I don't know what I'm doing that is wrong or not right, or I know it's wrong and yet I continue to choose to do it.
Hmm.
If somebody in your organization is doing something wrong and yet they choose to continue to do it, then it really comes down to very, very, very difficult conversations, and it's how you frame those conversations. And I would say that if an organization has a value statement and it means anything, if there's any credibility to your value statement, that is where I would begin my conversation. And I'm referring this in a volunteer department or a unionized environment. It's either one of them. Um, but the typical way that I would start a conversation is when you first got hired or you got offered this position, is this how you expected it to be? Is this how you expect it to be? Did you expect to feel these things?
Hmm.
Getting down into personal pain and mental health. Traditionally, Mark, we hire amazing human beings and we bring in some of the very, very, very best in our EMS and fire services. And they've been vetted and they're smart and they care and they have families, and something somewhere along the way has really caused them a lot of pain. And typically people that act out in these manners are in some terrible pain. So again, in the long game, assuming that we've provided third-party counsel, we provided feedback, we've done documentation. I also would do an audit on a file to make sure that we're also highlighting the things that they're doing right. It very quickly can go to one side where it's all discipline, but that shouldn't be the case.
Right.
And then it comes down, in my opinion, it comes down to frequent meetings that define the expectation of behavior and that outlines the upcoming steps of accountability. So you have some sort of framework to have these difficult conversations. And then the intent is starting with the end result. So if I was having a coaching counseling session with you, Mark, it would be, Mark, I want us to meet today with the intent to leave here with an understanding of what acceptable behavior is and the things that you're going to work on over these next 4 shifts to provide this type of service. Is it fair to say that we can focus our energy there? Get the buy-in? Yes. Okay. Now we use real examples, not perception, not anything else, but we use real life examples, have conversations, understand the frustrations, show the work effort on my side. If they need something out of me, I'm going to show my work. I'm going to give them receipts, is what we call it. We're going to show you that's been done. And in return, I would expect them to do the same. If they don't, the accountability has already been laid out for them. If they would like union representation, I would encourage it. Please have them in there because they are an advocacy. Having representation is healthy. It shows that the effort's being made. I hate to say that in some places it might take a long time for this to happen. Okay, our people are worth it. Either you accept the fact that this individual is going to need extra time, and that's what management is, right? That's why we get our paychecks.
Right.
And otherwise, if they are unwilling to change and we have documented it, then it is time to create that change for them and move on. And again, those are very difficult, uncomfortable things to do. But if you think about the culture of your organization, when you have an individual that is creating a toxic environment, a cancerous environment, it spreads. And as much as one person can have a incredibly positive impact on organization, one individual, at least on that shift, can really do the opposite. And it's our job to hold everyone accountable, including ourselves, to make sure that we're delivering the best version of ourselves we can. So those really difficult individuals that have been around for a long time and have struggled, typically they're in some pain. And they usually need to get that pain off their chest. They want to know that something might be there to help them, some alternatives, and we really have to listen. Just like we shouldn't recruit if we're not prepared to change and create a healthy environment, we shouldn't pretend to problem solve unless we're in a position to create change and make a better environment. It's the same thing. And if we're not the ones that can do that, we shouldn't be in our positions. We've been entrusted to create these changes, so we must act upon them.
When you talk about accountability, or when we talk about accountability, how does that in the fire service, EMS, how does that differ from responsibility when we talk about responsibility versus accountability?
Yeah. Responsibility is typically task-based. You can almost check, hey, my responsibilities today are to do these 5 things. Accountability is, I'm going to do them because I'm supposed to do them.
Okay.
And if I did something wrong, I'll hold myself accountability, which is also integrity. But also somebody near me knows that this environment, it's healthy to say, hey, Mark, do you want to double check those 4x4s? It looked like I only saw 2. We should have 8 and thing. That's the accountability piece. And it's healthy for us to hold ourselves accountable and for others to hold us accountable. And that is at all levels. That is not a lateral thing. That is down, up. That covers all bases. I was recently held accountable. I wasn't as prepared as I should have been on a drill night to have the whole drill planned out, and I had tasked it. Well, I failed to follow up with it to make sure it was tasked, and it wasn't. And so the last minute, I had to call and ask for someone to pick up a drill for me. That's not fair. That's not fair to that person. I can do better. And their frustration, they were really respectful about it, but they said, hey, this is causing some frustration here. That's accountability, right? They were respectful, they were professional. They let me know that there was an issue, and they're spot on. And so it was, what a blessing for me to be able to hear that, so
Mhm.
that I can go, you know what, you're right, I can do better, and now I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna
Yeah.
show you I can do better. And so that's how I look at responsibility for versus accountability. It was my responsibility to have a drill in place that was high quality, good use of time, and I failed on that. And so my folks held me accountable. And but again, with that respect and care that supports our culture, I was able to accept it, pivot, and then improve. And that's how I see the difference between responsibility and accountability.
Okay. From the article that we read this earlier at the onset, um, left out personally, I left out a big chunk on conflict.
Yeah,
You because mainly wanted to have some things to discuss and not just read from your article, have your opinion on it. And one of the sections is conflict isn't bad.
yeah.
Talk to us about why conflict isn't bad. And I've heard that in multiple from different leadership books and different talks. Talk to us in your opinion, why isn't conflict a bad thing?
Sure. Most things never get resolved without conflict. And so many times when we think of conflict, our brain's related to discipline. Conflict is a fight. Conflict is a thing. And we think of there's stress and there's eustress, right? There's a negative and the positive. I think that there's the same with conflict. When there's something on your mind and it bothers you and you need to talk about it and you hold it in, that becomes this inner conflict, right? The conflict still exists, but nothing's going to be changed. Nothing's going to be done. But going up to somebody and saying, hey, I this is on my mind, I want to share it with you, that's conflict. You're preparing for conflict, a conversation. The person could tell you no, so it depends on how you deal with that. It's handling conflict that is the trick, right? That's the difference in education. When I think about the fires that we fight, being in the firehouse, it's conflict isn't bad because I can solve problems. And when we've supported our firefighters to self-resolve conflict, it doesn't have to boil over. When accountability is encouraged, conflict is present without guilt. And so, but it's approaching it, Mark. That's where most of the failures happen. And there's some very easy, useful ways of approaching conflict, or at least managing conflict, that if someone has never learned them, it's uncomfortable. And until we practice managing conflict in a safe environment, it's tough for people to get really good at it. And typically, what happens in the fire service is that we promote our best firefighters to our officers, to our lieutenants, rather than taking a look at all of the soft skills that make a well-rounded individual.
Mhm.
So going back to the question, is the reason why I believe conflict is good is I think it's a skill. I think once it is an individual is comfortable or has mastered that skill, I think they can accomplish almost anything. And that's firehouse, that's on their personal lives, that extends beyond the firehouse into public forum, that expands into dealing with conflict on a social level. We see keyboard warriors battling the fights on social media,
Right.
and I always look at that and I'm like, what they're creating conflict, but nobody's resolving conflict, or no one
Right.
wants to resolve it. And so I don't have the bandwidth for it. I don't think a lot of our folks do. But if someone's been educated or has taken the time to understand, conflict is not something I should run from. Conflict is something I should be glad to be in, because it's temporary. I can deal with conflict and sit in a conflict world for a very long time, years, or I can deal with the conflict at hand and it's done. It's temporary. It's a transitional problem. And so that's how I view. I really think of it, without trying to sound cheesy, but I think it as an opportunity to get past something.
Sure. You mentioned it earlier in the discussion, and it's also mentioned in the article about conflict avoidance
Yeah.
and why conflict avoidance it can, you call it the modern dagger
Yeah.
in your article. So we talked about why conflict is a good thing. So it stands to reason that avoiding that conflict can be detrimental. Talk to us a
Yeah.
little bit about why you feel that way.
Typically I feel that it touches base on that. It's like passing the buck. either I don't want to deal with it, someone to give it to someone else to deal with, or somebody's asked me for help, but I don't know how to deal with that either. So I'm just going to push them on. So I've mastered, conflict avoidance. Well, the reason why it's the dagger is it's that baggage we carry, and it continues to build and build and build until somebody leaves. Right? It's the old saying that people don't leave their job, they leave their boss.
Hmm.
And there's a certain amount of truth to that. Um, and when someone has an issue and they are unable to resolve it through a conversation with the supervisor, that builds up that level of resentment, anger, mistrust, and that's the dagger, is that we lose people. That's why retention is so poor in so many places, because we haven't been able to really deal with how to solve a problem, or people feel unempowered. The modern dagger is, we spend so much time, throwing IVs. We spend so much time, bagging. We spend so much time being great on the monitor. We spend so much time on the fire ground, throwing ladders, pulling hose, doing all these amazing things. And our people are the best at it. And then I would ask the question, how much energy did we put into conflict resolution in the firehouse? It's uncomfortable to do. It doesn't feel normal. We're here to people didn't join the fire service to deal with conflict. They
Right.
join the fire service or the EMS service to take care of patients. But the reality is that there's more than that. And so being able to understand that it's not time to pass the buck when conflict arises. It's time to have difficult conversations, to say difficult things, to be transparent, to be honest, and to be willing to receive things that are uncomfortable, so that you can address them and work through them.
Hmm.
And if you're willing to be, if we're willing to go and run into burning houses or jump into the middle of an overdose without thinking, knowing that we are doing what's right, I believe that same energy can be framed in conflict management, knowing that this might suck, I might not enjoy it, but I'm in it and I'm going to deal with it.
If you talk to us a little bit about how you deal with conflict among officers, chief officer, you have a captain who may be underperforming, may not be fulfilling the expectations you have for him. So how does a battalion chief like yourself maybe deal with that underperforming captain who is not fulfilling your expectations, who is not holding up his responsibilities, if you will? So
Sure.
now you have that conflict between the officers, and how does that look, and how do you look at resolution for that?
I'll preface it with, it's largely based on your current relationship and the
Okay.
level of trust that you've earned. How I manage it would be to let the individual know, front load the information. Mark, I need to have a conversation with you regarding performance over this past month, and it might be uncomfortable, so I'd like to speak with you about it in private, whatever that looks like. So now I've front loaded your brain so that you know exactly what it is. I hope that you don't come in fear, because we have a relationship, but you know what the topic's about. I don't have a hidden agenda. This is what we're going to speak on. And then when we sit down and speak, I'm specific. I'm removing the individual's behaviors and I'm focusing on the results, because that's what the conversation's about, unless it's about behavior. But if we're focusing on the results, then I want to focus on the results, and say, Mark, the expectation has been that we would have our rigs checked and signed off twice a day, every day. After review of your shift, I noticed there was 4 missing, uh, I'm looking to understand how this happened. Now, if I open it up with, I want to understand it. It means right now I'm not casting blame. I'm not, Mark, you're so stubborn. You don't do this. No, no, no. I
Hmm.
don't know what happened. There might be, maybe you're off those 4 days.
Okay.
Maybe you're sick. Maybe there's other circumstances. Again, we hire amazing human beings. We have amazing people. So typically when things don't go right, something's usually behind it. And so then I want to find out, are you okay? Right. And I'm not trying to get all soft, but are you okay? It means everything okay. And then second, why did this happen? Why did these get missed? Okay. Now I get to evaluate, do we have a process problem? Do we have a system problem? Do I have a stocking problem? What are the issues that I need to address or we can address to fix this issue? That's usually where my brain goes first. I want to fix the issue to prevent it from happening again. Now, if we've gone through all of these steps and we continue to find out Mark just didn't do it, you just failed to do it.
Mhm.
Now you're making a decision, right? Now it's a decision-based performance issue. And now it's very clear, Mark, as we spoke about, this is unacceptable. And I'm going to be documenting this because I need a change of behavior from you. And now the documentation can happen verbally, it can happen written, it could be a second written, a third written, a call to the union, whatever your department has.
Right.
But the point is, though, is that accountability piece happens. They see it happening, they know it happens. And for me, this would be a transactional feeling, right? Because I'm not mad at you. You don't upset me if you didn't do something. I'm not, why would I be upset? Why would this be my baggage? I just need to make sure it's getting done, right?
Sure.
And so for me, I can look at it and say, well, Mark, we had this conversation, this date and time, you acknowledged it. It's happened again. As we explained, I'm going to be documenting this.
Mhm.
If this does happen again, Mark, the next step of discipline is X, Y, or Z.
Right.
And along the way, what do you need for me to support you? What is there anything that can be done to help remind you to do these things, whatever the topic is? If somebody is unwilling at that point to do their job, if somebody's unwilling to look for solutions and make their job better, if they're unwilling or incapable of finding help or getting support, then they're going to continue to cause these issues, and somebody else is waiting in the shadow to take that spot.
Right.
I have not had to terminate a fellow officer, thankfully, because of building a relationship. Because I don't go into them mad. I have no reason to be mad.
Mhm.
But they also know I will do my job. I will hold them accountable, and I'm going to give them every single resource possible to fix the problem. Because if the problem's on my side, I'm failing them. They didn't fail the system. I failed them. And so that's how I would present it. If it was to a fellow officer, if it's to a fellow firefighter, it's a very similar approach. It maintains relationships and maintains integrity, and it's character consistency. That's the other piece of it. If it's a Monday or a Friday or a captain or lieutenant, it's going to be very, very, very similar conversation.
Right.
And they're going to know I care, but I'm not apathetic, but they certainly aren't going to get any sympathy out of me or empathy. But that's how I view those issues, Mark. They don't seem to be, for me, filled with emotion. I'm just trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah.
What went wrong here? And if it was a decision, well, then we're going to focus on discipline.
Right. And you mentioned something, touched on something a few moments ago that I think is very important to remember and to remind people. Discipline is about changing behavior, not necessarily about getting someone in trouble or flexing your muscles, so to speak. It's about changing the behavior. It's a behavior that, in this case, you mentioned the failing to sign off the truck checks. You need to change that behavior. You need to get those truck checks to be signed off, and therefore that's the means for, or that's the reason for the discipline, is to change that behavior. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand that, especially those that come from the military, like myself. Sometimes when we hear discipline, we don't necessarily think of it as changing behavior. We think of it as drop and give me 20.
Yeah, yeah. There will be a crime, and you pay it.
Right.
Well, going back to that earlier in the communication, when you tell someone you do the truck checks, they didn't do it, it's a behavior change. Then they also need to know why truck checks are important,
Right.
how they are involved, and how this has a ripple effect throughout the group. And I think that also helps people understand. I had no idea that it was that big of a deal. I thought it
Right.
was just, well, no, it's got a really big deal. These
Right.
things are linked to it.
Yeah.
Answering the why in that is fantastic, and putting that in the documentation. And but again, just to re-support what you just said, it's about creating a behavior change. I choose to do it correctly because I see the value in it.
Yeah.
I choose to do it correctly because I know I'm going to have a ripple effect, and I'm going to
Mhm.
really upset the next few shifts. There's a lot of value in that.
Yep. Yep. Um, in the bio, we talked about you speaking at FDIC. You spoke earlier this month down at Texas A&M Engineering Extension for their leadership symposium. We had a discussion last fall when we were up at the National Fire Academy regarding if someone wants to get into speaking. And I know we had a pretty in-depth discussion, but for those who are listening or thinking, hey, you know, I could maybe do something like this. What's some advice that you have for someone who's kind of on the fence about whether they want to speak at a symposium, a conference, just or even to their own department to do a class, to do a presentation?
Yeah. I would say if they're looking at a larger level where they have a very important message they want to get out, the number one thing I usually advise people to do is to start writing articles. Being able to create articles, create original content is important. And with that original content, submit it to Fire Engineering, Fire Magazine, submit it to these publications, these articles, these publishers. Locally, you start with your department, go local, go regional, go national, but get that content out there so you start to get feedback about your writing skills. You start to find things that are interesting, that have things that people have similarities with. But writing is a tremendous way to get started. And then as far as looking for speaking opportunities, there are agencies like the National Volunteer Fire Council, your National Association of Fire Chiefs, or major conferences, FDIC, or even state-run association conferences, and almost all of them every single year are looking for speakers. They're looking for presenters, and what typically gets your content picked is if it's interesting and if it's attached to an article. Is there something there that provides additional value? And find something in a time frame that you can deliver your content on. Sometimes you get 1 hour, you get 4 hours, you get 8 hours. I would only recommend that you apply at things or functions or conferences that you can fill the time with your content. The worst thing you could do is you have 1 hour content, you pick up a 4 hour class. It'll be misery for you and the group. So find things that are similar to it. And then the last part of this is also making sure you have the time. The speaking part is tremendous and it's fun. And it can also start to get out of control. There's a lot of requests that can come through, and making sure that you manage your time, understand your audience, know when to say no. Is really important. There might be a bunch of yeses you say on the front end to get you some opportunity to build up your resume, but be mindful about where your content's going, and the message that you've got. If you're ever unsure about your content, just run it by others. Make sure that you own the content, though. The pictures, every word of it, you got to own it. It has to be from you. You can most definitely quote other people, but plagiarism and AI will get you into some trouble real quickly. So
Yeah.
you've got to own the content. But to the very first thing I'd mention is article submission. Submit your articles, and that's a real great way to get started. Matter of fact, if you ever would like to speak at FDIC, you must have had articles that were sent through Fire Engineering. And so that's one of their criteria. So that's just different ways to look at it. But someone that wants to do speaking, yeah, if you've got some speaking fears, the best way to get over them is in your own station and start practicing. Every time I go to speak somewhere, I've practiced it and I've rehearsed it many times by myself. And I've learned a couple tricks to splash cold water on my face before I go up and speak. And then I have a pressure point in my hand that I hold on to when I speak in a group, so that my hands aren't all over the place, moving and causing distraction.
Interesting.
And yeah, so there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. But the more you practice, I would say it took me 3 years, maybe 4 years before I got to a level of comfort. So expect a couple of years of discomfort, but remember that again, these conferences are filled with people that they want to learn. They
Mhm.
care, they want to understand, and they're looking for these tidbits. They're not looking for you to entertain them for 30 minutes like a TV sitcom. They're looking to have some takeaways. So provide takeaways. Give folks something that they can take with them, a tool that they can use, something that can help them do their job better. And I believe that's how you can have a lasting impact, at least as a speaker.
And for those that are on the EMS side and not necessarily fire engineering and GEMS are under the same publishing umbrella. Their conferences are commingled at FDIC. So there's the GEMS conference. So you can still publish through GEMS and still speak at FDIC just on the EMS side.
Yeah, there were many speakers at FDIC that were GEMS published authors, and many topics. I couldn't even give you the number that were EMS specifically focused. That's a critical part of the FDIC delivery.
Mhm. So, Matt, as we get ready to wrap up, once again, thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today. Um, any parting thoughts you want to leave with us on, accountability, expectations, conflict, anything that you want to just reiterate, emphasize, just something you want to leave with us before we wrap up?
Well, first, thanks again for having me, Mark. I would say for anybody that's looking to create change in their organization is define what you want that change to look like. And remember, your culture is your currency. For anybody that would want to join your organization, that's your currency. And every time that you don't hold someone accountable or you let things happen that don't reflect positively on your organization, you've taken a withdrawal from your cultural deposit, and that bank account is limited. So I would really ask that everyone focus on the communication skills, the soft skills, to manage conflict in a way that's comfortable for them, and to encourage it in their organizations. That character consistency creates some really positive things, and it can turn a difficult work shift into a really fun one. So, I that's what I'd leave you with, Mark, and for everybody out there, just to continue, keep pushing through. There's so many wonderful things that we have in this field,
Mhm.
and it just takes time and energy to get to it. So that's it.
Awesome. One final question for you, Matt. And what's the last book that you read?
Let's see here. The last book that I read, actually, I got it right here. It's called Ship Happens, and it's the ultimate guide to It's Your Ship by Captain Michael Abrashoff. And this was written also by Stacy Cunningham. And it goes into a deep dive really on the book and taking risks and taking actions and so forth. So that's the most recent book I've read.
Awesome. That's
Yep.
great. I am familiar with the Michael Abrashoff books. That was one of the very first leadership books that I received. Was
Nice.
it's your ship. So
Yep. Yep.
very
I love it.
very interesting.
Yep. That's my
Um,
favorite one.
any social media you want to leave with us or website for people that want to learn more about Estacada?
Estacadafire.org is our department's website. Oregon Fire Recruitment Network.com. Yeah, very long URL, but that is for the Fire Recruitment Network, which we developed in 2011. And I'm available. I'd love to reach out to people on LinkedIn. And
Okay.
so if you're on LinkedIn, please reach out, Matt Aalto at LinkedIn, and I would love to connect with you.
Outstanding. Well, for here at the podcast, we are on Instagram. Our handle is not underscore a underscore fib underscore podcast. You can want to connect with us there. And if you need to email me, we are at not.a.fib.podcast@gmail.com. So, Matt, once again, thanks so much for your time. For everyone out there, thank you for joining us, and we will talk again next month.